Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's English fall lesson. My name is Marina Seeley, and this lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Centre and broadcast by Pakama Research and Development. Today we are tackling Paper 3. To be specific, Section A, which of course is the essay. Remember that your Paper 3 consists of 3 sections. Section A, the essay, Section B, the longer transactional, and Section C, the shorter transactional texts. Section A counts a total of 50 marks. But before we get to the nitty-gritty, I want to implore you to think about Paper 3 as your opportunity to voice your own ideas, to be as imaginative as you want to be, and to just enjoy it. Remember, if you write from the heart, good marks will invariably follow. So let's take a look at Section A, the essay. What exactly is that? Now, when you get your Paper 3, Section A will give you a range of topics to choose from, and you have to write 250 to 300 words. So, it's a piece of writing of 250 to 300 words in which you respond to a topic. You will be given a number of topics to choose from, normally around 6 or 7. But you need to respond to only one. Let's recap quickly. As you know, you might have been taught by your teacher that there are different types of essays. Number 1, the narrative essay. 2, descriptive essay. 3, the argumentative essay. 4, the discursive essay, and finally, the reflective essay. Let's take a closer look at what each of these essays entails. The narrative essay, of course, is a story. It is a piece of writing that recreates an experience through time. It can be based on your own experience in the past, or in the present, or it can be based on experiences of someone else, or it can just be plainly fictional. It communicates a main idea or a lesson learned. The second one is the descriptive essay. It's quite a dangerous one, to be honest, so you have to be very, very careful, and your vocabulary should be really supreme. In the descriptive essay, we use our 5 senses. Remember that you are creating a picture with the words that you choose. And we as humans are sensory beings. We learn by touch, we learn by taste, smell, sight. I'm sure there is a smell that brings back such happy memories for you. I think about my own life and I think about my father, who would make coffee early in the morning, as early as 4, and I would wake up from the aroma of the coffee permeating every nook and cranny of the house. But you know what? It is not about the coffee. That smell reminds me of my father and the security and the love I experienced in the house that I grew up in. And that, after all, is what is most important. And that is what a descriptive essay does. It introduces the reader to a little bit of your life. And you must use words in such a way that you create a picture where the reader can almost smell or taste what you are describing to them. So instead of telling them, you show them with your words. But don't force all the senses. I'm now saying you have to use your senses, but there's also something like too much. Let's use an example. The sky is a bright shade of blue, and white clouds seem to float in it. It is a pretty picture. Sky is a bright shade of blue. You can almost see that color of blue, and white clouds seem to float in it. Have I successfully painted a picture? Yes, I'm sure. But what about this one? Puffy white clouds float across the cobalt blue sky. Doesn't that make you want to almost touch the clouds? And they are puffy, so they are rounded. They're not these fleecy kind of clouds that hang around. And cobalt blue is an intense blue that you might find in winter time. Take care, you will see that there is a hyphenated word, cobalt blue. It describes the sky intensely. Remember, a descriptive essay is usually written in the present or the past tense, but it's very important that when you choose the tense to write in, that you stay in that tense and not chop and change between present and past, unless, of course, you include something narrative, a short description, or something like that. You can use figures of speech in original ways. I would suggest at least 2, but too much is very often too much. It's like too much sugar in your coffee. It is sweet, but too sweet. So we should be very careful of that. It's very important that you write about something that you know something about. I love sport. I love watching it. But taking part in sport, another word is participating, not so much. So I don't really have the vocabulary to write a descriptive essay on sport or how it is to participate in sport, or I can't really describe a sporting event from a sporting person's perspective. But I might just be able to write an essay on what the spectators do at such a sporting event. So I might write something about that. You may use adjectives. Let's remind ourselves, adjectives describe the nouns in sentences, or adverbs, and they describe verbs in a sentence. In other words, you draw a picture with your words. The third essay is a reflective essay. Reflective means looking back upon an event, experience that sets the scene. It's very much like looking in the mirror. It is your image that is reflected back. And sometimes we think about an event that we experienced and we want to kind of describe it to someone else. And for that, we need the correct words. You'll see that I very often refer to vocabulary or the correct choice of words. You need words. And where do you get that? By reading, by allowing yourself to become engaged in language. By the way, it is a language and not a subject. A reflective essay is very often written in the past tense, except when you talk about how it has influenced you. In other words, when you evaluate the experience that you are reflecting on. You may use your skills of description. A reflective essay should, first of all, focus on a clearly defined and well-developed incident. The incident may consist of a series of closely related incidents. You need to provide background information. You can include elements of the narrative, in other words, a story, the plot, the characters, the setting, and definitely conflict. But you need to organize the events clearly. chronological order works the best. Now let's stop there for a moment. The word chronological seems such a wow word, and many of you might be thinking, what in the world does that mean? Let me quickly show you how you can work out what a word means that you haven't seen before or that you haven't used before. The word chronological can be divided into two parts. Chrono, which means time, and logical, which means something that makes sense. In other words, time that makes sense. You can think about Little Red Riding Hood, for example. Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Her name was Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother asked her to take some food for her grandmother, who lives deep in the woods. She can't wait to see her grandmother again, so she happily skips down the path into the wood. But she's not scared because she's going to meet her grandmother. And suddenly she comes across the wolf, and the wolf tells her that he knows a shorter path. She takes the shorter path. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the naughty wolf runs ahead, eats the grandmother, and waits for Little Red Riding Hood to come. She knocks on the door, and then he opens up, and then he gobbles her up as well. Do you see that there is a chronological order? In other words, the things that happen make sense in time. That is chronological. So we have sorted another word for your little word knapsack. Include appropriate word choice. Explain the significance of the incident. Remember that you need to invite the reader to share in what you have experienced. But try to maintain a consistent point of view. The next essay we are looking at is the argumentative essay. Now, you know what it is to argue. Personally, I don't like conflict very much, but there are some people who actually thrive on conversations where they argue a specific point. So, in an argumentative essay, you begin by stating your opinion of the topic. You follow that by giving reasons to support your view, and then you link them in a logical way. For example, using linking words like because, this shows that, however, therefore, etc. You need to end your essay with a strong conclusion that clearly and convincingly states your opinion. When you write an argumentative essay, you take a stand. And this is a very important skill, not only for English. It is also very important in other subjects like history, life sciences, economics. I also think of business economics. And then, of course, in your home language, you need to write an essay. And the following set of rules also apply for that. So you don't only write an essay for English. You can use that skill for the rest of your life. When you write this essay, think about the Peel principle. For those of you who have not come across it, this is something interesting and something that you can really use very well. For those of you who've met it before, I'm just going to emphasize the importance of this method. Your paragraph should include P, a point. In other words, you make your point. The first E is for evidence. You back up your point by supporting your point with evidence and examples. The second E is for explanation. Here you explain how the evidence supports your point. And then lastly, you link it, and that's what the L is for. You link the point to the next point in the following paragraph, or you can also go back to your main point. Here are a couple of tips for a good argumentative essay. The essay should start with your view of the topic in an original and striking way. Let's take the topic of abortion, for example. You could start your essay by saying, I believe that abortions should be abolished. Case in point, you've made your point. But is that really striking? Let's try something else. I felt the sharp instrument touching my leg. It burnt. And slowly and surely, I experienced the lameness setting in. Every part of my body. Until the last thing I remember is my brain dissolving. Abortion is not the easy way out. Abortion is murder. That is my point of view. But it's a good way, a striking way, to start an essay. You give a range of arguments to support and substantiate your view. You focus on points for or against a statement. Remember, in an argumentative essay, you should take a stand. You can't sit on the wire and say, oh yes, but it might be and it might not be. Here you need to be very clear which side you are on. An argumentative essay is subjective and strong opinions are expressed. Subjective would imply that you are involved in the thought process. Opposite to that would be the objective view. Objective is when you look at something from a distance. You are not involved. But obviously, with an argumentative essay, you are in the middle of the thing because these opinions are yours. You can use a variety of rhetorical devices and persuasive techniques which you have come across during your language lessons. The most obvious rhetorical device would be a rhetorical question. Oh yes, it is used to, or it is a question without an answer. But what does the use of a rhetorical question actually do? It makes the reader think about their own ideas about this topic. It allows them to question their preconceived ideas, those things that they've grown up with, those things that they thought they've worked out for themselves. And in that way, you actually engage the reader. You invite them into your thought process to question what they are thinking. Obviously, sometimes they would still stand with their idea, and that is what an argumentative point is all about. The language use is emotive. In other words, lots of emotion is involved here and can be emotional, but should never be rude. Your conclusion should be a strong, clear, and convincing statement of your opinion. Remember, your conclusion just brings everything together and closes your opinion. The next one is a discursive essay. Now, the word discursive, if you look at it, you might acknowledge or identify another word there. Yes, that's right, a discussion. A discursive essay presents both sides of the issue based on a topic. It gives a balanced account of the views without favoring one view. Now, here it's also factual, but it's a little bit different from the argumentative one. How would you ask? Exactly this. Remember, we just discussed that the argumentative essay discusses one side or one viewpoint, while the discursive essay discusses both points. And you don't need to decide which one is right or which one is wrong. It gives reasons to support each view and link them together by using words such as because, however, so, therefore, etc. You need to be clear and objective. Remember, we talked about subjective before? Here we come across the word objective. The next option is responding to a picture. And if I can let you into a little secret, those essays are the ones that gets the most or the best marks in the final exams. You choose only one picture to write about. Normally you are given 3 or 4. A picture essay can take any form of an essay: narrative, descriptive, argumentative, discursive, or reflective that we discussed in the previous slides. There must be a clear link between your essay and the picture that you have chosen. You don't have to describe everything that is in the picture. You can take one element and build on that. You are requested to use your imagination, and you can interpret it in any way, figuratively or literally. Consider the literal and the figurative meanings before you write your final essay. Let's just stop there for a minute and look at the word figurative. Figurative would mean an interpretation. So a heart might not be a heart only, but it also represents love. So the physical picture of a heart would represent love. That is figurative. Literal, we all know. In other words, that's the real meaning. What the content is or the story you can write on, if you look at that picture, look at different ways, different types of essays that you can write from that picture. Remember that is a visual stimulus. That's a big word. It actually stimulates your imagination to start working, and you should allow that to happen. Let us look at this picture. It is a picture of a boot. It's on some soil. Shame, this boot has seen better days. You can describe the boot. You can perhaps say or question whom it might belong to. In other words, you can tell the story of the person who wore this boot. Or, on a figurative level, you can write about the footprints that we leave in life. Now, that could be a role model. That could be a hero. It could be a descriptive essay on somebody really important in your life who left footprints in your life. But remember, the focus here is on we. So there should be something philosophical in this essay. Or you can write about devastation after a flood. Now, you, unless you were born under a rock and stayed there for your whole life, might remember the devastating floods that we've had in KZN. You can use that prior knowledge and actually write a pretty brilliant essay. So what makes an essay good? The first thing is selecting a topic. And you need to select a topic that is good or right for you. Remember, you know yourself. You've been living with yourself 17, 18, 19, 20 odd years. So you know yourself best. You know what type of person you are. If you are into detail, then a descriptive essay would be very good for you. If you are into philosophical things, then a reflective essay would be very good for you. But only you can decide that. Prior knowledge and vocabulary is important. Remember, previously I said, I love watching sport, but I've never participated in sport. And for that reason, I don't have the necessary vocabulary to actually describe my first soccer match, but you might. Very important is proper planning. Now, I know that's the bane of your existence. And as a teacher, I often had questions like, "Ma'am, should we have a planning before this essay?" Yes, you do. Because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that's when you get mediocre marks. A striking introduction. You need to hook that reader to want to read on. You need interesting content. You can't just start off well and then kind of flounder through the rest of the essay. You need to use effective words, sentences, and punctuation. And then, of course, you need a striking conclusion. Editing is extremely important. Very often you are required to write a first draft, especially when you're in class and you are doing class tasks. And the first draft is there for you to read again and then correcting things that you see that have gone wrong in your essay, such as wrong spelling, wrong use of tense, sentences that are too long, or punctuation that you can add or that you need to take away. Let's take a look at the topic. Remember, we said we need to select a topic. You need to analyze the key words and phrases in that topic. Very often you see a topic, you see a key word, and you go, "This is what I'm going to write about." And then you get started. And then somewhere along the line, your thoughts and ideas just stop. Or you flounder along and pray that you actually just finish this essay within the 300-word limit. Very often, you have misinterpreted the topic, and then your marks actually pay the price for that. Let's take a look at one topic. We are actually going to discuss 3, but let's look at the first one. This is my journey. It's a very nice topic to write about, and anyone can write about that. So let's see. This, it's specific. It is a specific journey. My would refer to something that's personal. And then a journey could be literal. That could be a trip to the coast or an overseas trip that you enjoyed thoroughly. Or it could be figurative, your journey through life. And in this case, you can write a narrative essay, you can write a reflective essay, you can write a descriptive essay. Let's look at a second one, the gathering storm. Now, this one is tricky because the word gathering implies that the storm has not arrived yet. And if you write about you being in the middle of the storm and it's raging around you and it's thunder and it's lightning and you are soaked through, then you are misinterpreting the topic or you are deviating from the topic, and that is dangerous. So gathering would be not yet arrived. Yet again, the word storm could be literal or it could be figurative. A storm could be a dangerous event or a very painful event in your life. A storm obviously implies chaos, something that you have no control over. So here you can also write a narrative, a reflective, or even a descriptive essay. The third one is more discursive or even argumentative if you wanted to. Caring for the environment is everyone's responsibility. You need to know what the word environment means before you can actually tackle this topic. And the word everyone implies every person. And as you can see, you can write an argumentative or a discursive, even a narrative, and yes, a reflective essay. Let's take a look at the structure of a good essay. Now here, I want you to think about your favorite sandwich. No, you can't have food now, or even if you do, while you are chewing, you must still listen to me. I believe that there's nothing like a good sandwich to make you feel relaxed and at ease and at home. And it doesn't matter what your favorite filling is. A sandwich is it's just brilliant. So why am I referring to a sandwich? A good sandwich has a couple of components. Number one, you need fresh bread, not sliced too thinly, because it's going to fall apart, especially if you add lots and lots of fillings. You need scrumptious fillings. You need lettuce, fresh lettuce that actually cracks under your teeth, or tomato, or salami, or cold meat, or whatever you fancy. And who doesn't like a slice of cheese? So how do I bring that to a good essay? First of all, a good essay needs a strong, fresh introduction. It needs striking ideas. It needs good vocabulary, well thought through. I wouldn't really add cheese to my peanut butter sandwich, but sometimes we do, and it's horrific. But some people might like it. But remember, your choice of words is important. So you need to choose the correct ones that go together. A variety of sentences. We'll refer to sentence variety in a little bit. But you can't just write one sentence in one paragraph. Sometimes I mark essays that starts off with a capital letter and ends 5 lines later with a full stop. My dear grade 12 learner, you have lost me on line 2. Choose your sentence length carefully. And then, of course, what a good sandwich needs is a good bottom slice of bread. You don't want all those lovely itty-bitties to fall to the ground. And in an essay, you need a very good conclusion. I refer back to the tips for writing good essays. First of all, selecting your topic. When you get your paper 3, you normally have your 10 minutes reading time. And during this time, I would suggest you do the following. Read through the topics and then select 2 possible topics that you might want to write about. Why do I choose 2? Because you might want to brainstorm those 2 very quickly. Remember, you haven't started writing yet. You need to read through the topics carefully, and then you need to decide, I have enough words to write about this. Oh, this topic actually speaks to me, or that picture speaks to me. So then you brainstorm the 2 topics. Invariably, one topic will hit a wall. What does that mean? It means that your ideas and thoughts would just stop. That's not the right topic for you. So you need to let it go. The other topic will open up various possibilities. Words will come tumbling out, phrases will come tumbling out, and that might be the one that you want to elaborate on. Now you are ready to plan your essay. Let's take a look at different kinds of plannings. I know that teachers usually talk about a mind map, and you've been using mind maps, or you were told from a very early age that you have to use mind maps. My dear grade 12, if your mind map doesn't look like this mind map, it just isn't a mind map. If you look carefully, your topic will be right in the middle where it says mind mapping. And then you will have little tentacles going out, and each tentacle will represent an idea. And that idea will get more little tentacles as your thought process develops. You will also see some pictures in the middle of it. You might want to use pictures as well. Remember, the mind is very good and you are a visual generation. So sometimes little pictures will also stand in good stead. The second type of planning could be a flow chart. Now, this is one that you might recognize. And I actually dare to say that most of your planning will take this form. It is not wrong either. It is a flow chart. Let's just go back to the previous one. I want to add something. Oh, sorry. I want to add something. The little technological gremlin has joined me. So let's take a quick break. And I want you to talk about or think about the type of mind map or planning that you might like to do. I'm back. We've sorted out the gremlins and we are back to the flow chart. Actually, sometimes we have a different way of thinking and a different way of organizing ourselves. I am quite chaotic, but I don't like chaos. A mind map is all very good and well, but it upsets me a little. So I prefer a flow chart. When you use a flow chart, you have a main idea, and that main idea branches out into different ideas, and those different ideas branch out into different ideas. It's exactly the same thing as a mind map, but it just seems a little more organized. And then, of course, there are those of us who can't stop thinking and writing notes. And you don't have to write it in little clouds. I'm sure that your planning usually looks like that. It's little clouds. And then you quickly write it in before you hand in your essay. That is not planning. You are fooling yourself. Planning is of the essence. And if you plan well and spend enough time on that, you won't need to write the first draft because your essay will actually write itself. What is brainstorm? Brainstorm is to write down words, phrases, and ideas as they come to mind. Some ideas may seem stupid to you, but you need to write them down anyway. Remember, later on, you are going to sift through all those ideas, scratch some out, move them to a different position on your planning, and sometimes you don't even use them. By the way, planning doesn't have to be neat. Planning can be messy because sometimes our thoughts are like that. And if you need to choose a topic that you haven't seen before and you have to write about that, there's no way that you can have a perfect plan. Plans change all the time. And therefore, your planning doesn't have to be neat. Actually, when it's too neat, a teacher might think that it's contrived. In other words, you've actually worked on it until it's perfect. And that is not what planning is at all. Once you have selected your ideas, you read through the notes and you organize them into 3 or 4 main ideas. You'll very quickly see that of all the brainstorming thoughts, ideas, words, and phrases that you've written down, you would be able to organize them in 3 or 4 different parts, even 5 if you like. Each idea will become a paragraph. Can you see how planning is actually very, very important? By now, you might also know what type of essay you want to write. And remember, that has a lot to do with who you are and your strengths and the type of books you like to read or the types of things that you are interested in. You are ready to write your introduction. So let's practice. We are back to the picture of a boot. When you look at the picture, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's a boot. I name that. It is worn. It is damaged. Another word that you might like to use is tattered, because it's kind of falling apart. It is black with orange in between. Initially, when I looked at the picture, I thought, it has orange laces. Only later did I realize that the laces are actually black as well, but there are bits of orange in between. The boot is broken. To some extent, it even looks a little burnt. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, who does this boot belong to? Create a vivid image of the owner of this boot. The first thing I thought, it might be a child or it might be a man. I don't really think women would wear this kind of boot. But I might be wrong. It might be a hiking boot. Can you see how images start popping up in our mind of who this boot might belong to? What is the story of the boot? I always go to a crime scene. This might be the only clue left on a crime scene. My question would be, so does it belong to the victim? Does it belong to the murderer? Just look at the possibility. And let's get back to the KwaZulu-Natal floods. It might be a person that was lost after the floods. And the only thing that they could retrieve was a boot. You could also write a discursive essay or an argumentative essay about the effects of the heavy rains and the flooding across South Africa. You can use statistics about the lives lost. And no, nobody's going to check whether your statistics is correct. But you can use that. You can refer to the rescue operations. I remember distinctly in a news feed about a K9 soldier or a police woman who lost her life. She was part of the retrieval squad, and she unfortunately lost her life. I think of her. I think of her dog. And that opens up many possibilities. You can also talk about the effect that this flood has had on our economy. Remember, the floods were not limited to KwaZulu-Natal only. You can refer to floods worldwide. You can also refer to measures that can be put in place to avoid future lives or losses. Do you see that by looking at a picture, all your ideas explode? But you must give yourself the permission to let your imagination flow. You're not going to write about all of this, but one little teeny tiny bit in this might just create an avalanche of thoughts and ideas that you can write about. And this might be the most brilliant essay that you have ever written. And yes, sometimes we give 50-50 or 50 out of 50 for an essay. It is possible. Let's look at the introductory paragraph. It needs to invite the reader to want to know more. Let's read the following introductory sentence. It was midnight, and it was raining hard, and the thunder was very loud, and the lightning was bright. My first question is, did it create a picture? Yes, for sure. I've used my senses. I've set the scene. I said it was midnight. It was raining hard. I got information about the thunder, that was very loud. I used descriptive words. It looks like a really, really good sentence. But as far as an introductory sentence goes, not so much. So, what is the problem with the sentence, you might ask? Number one, it is too long. It was midnight, and it was raining hard, and the thunder was loud, and the lightning was bright. You've lost me somewhere. All because the word "and" has been used too often, which makes it rather boring and tedious, specifically for your introductory sentence. It states facts, but it does not paint a picture that the reader can imagine. So, how would you make this sentence more interesting? You can vary sentence length. You can describe what the speaker is experiencing. Remember, we need to paint the picture, invite the reader into our world. We need them to almost feel the cold rain. We must make them almost touch the thunder and the lightning. Use interesting vocabulary to paint a clear picture. The reader should imagine himself in the scene. Use punctuation. Remember, we do not only have full stops and commas. We have so much more than that. What keeps us from using exclamation marks or question marks? An exclamation mark conveys atmosphere and tone. The moment there's an exclamation mark, you say, pay attention, watch out. I've just used short sentences, and my tone of voice created the atmosphere. And that is what we want. And that's what makes a good writer. I chopped and changed the sentence a little. It's the same content, just a little different. I woke up with a start. The thunder roared me out of my slumber. The lightning was so bright that every corner in my bedroom was light as day, even though I knew it was midnight. Have I added any information that's different from the previous introductory sentence? The answer is no. What I did was I chose words to have impact. I woke with a start, exclamation mark, short sentence, it draws attention. The next sentence, I used personification. The thunder roared me out of my slumber. And then instead of using the normal word sleep, I used the word slumber. The lightning was so bright that every corner in my bedroom was light as day. I'm sure that you've experienced a lightning, a thunderstorm like that, where the lightning was so bright that you could see everything in your room clearly, as though someone had switched on the light. It creates a clear picture. It creates atmosphere. That is what you want. There you are hooking the reader. You give the information that it was midnight, so you haven't left out anything. You've just chopped and changed it a little. When we started, I said, we do not only write for marks. We write to share our thoughts and ideas. Another secret I can share with you is, as a teacher, I loved creative writing, marking it, setting the papers, because this is the opportunity to get into a young mind, to see what you are thinking, feeling, experiencing. And no, not to be a psychologist, but this is the platform where you can actually share a little bit of yourself. Big secret, keep that in mind. If you keep the reader's interest, good marks will follow. The body of the essay. You expand on the ideas that you have selected in your planning phase. Each idea will develop into a paragraph. I can guarantee you that. Choose your words carefully to create interest and paint pictures. Remember, you keep your sentence length in mind. The shorter the sentence, the more impact. If you want to create tension, if you're writing a narrative essay, then a shorter sentence here and there just grabs the attention and makes the reader almost hold their breath. And that is what you want. Use punctuation effectively. Be careful of repetition. If you have not planned properly, we very often see that you repeat the same idea, only said in different ways. And that is something that you have to guard against, because it becomes boring and tedious. And the marker actually just wants to get it done. And that is not what we want. We want to engage the reader, to want to read on, to want to read more. The body of an essay normally follows a specific pattern. I want you to think about a famous or a favorite movie of yours, or a favorite story. It might be a fairy tale that your mom told you during bedtime, or it might be a movie that you have watched, or it might be a novel that you've read. It might be a short story that you've read in literature. But be it whatever it may be, a story usually has a specific pattern. There is an introduction or a hook, something that drags the attention or actually catches the attention and holds it. Then there is the rising action. And during the rising action, you are introduced to the characters and the plot. In other words, your ideas are developed. In a narrative essay, this is the perfect spot where you work on conflict. You include conflict, internal conflict, external conflict, conflict with the situation, where the action happens. And this is a very crucial part of your essay, because if this falls flat, then your essay has also fallen flat on its face. And we don't want that, do we? Then we get to the climax, and the climax is that spot where something has got to give. The tension is built to such an extent that it needs to be relieved in some or other way. I love to use the example of an elastic that you can put in your hair, or that you bind folders with. If you take that elastic and you turn and turn and turn and turn it, the tension in that elastic builds up, and eventually it must snap. And that is your climax. And then after that, we get to the resolution, where the problems are solved, relationships are mended, and everybody lives happily ever after in a clever conclusion. So let's practice. I'm referring back to the boot again. In a discursive essay, you could, in paragraph 1, refer to the devastation of the storm. Describe the devastation. Describe what you see. Describe the scene. The trees that are just like twigs thrown around in the waves. The mud that creeps down the valley. The thunder that roars. The feeling of loss of control. The sounds of buildings creaking, wood giving way. That would describe the devastation. Paragraph 2 would refer to reasons why flooding or mudslides occurred. And here you need some background information, obviously. You can't just flounder along here. So if you are not one of those who love facts and stating facts and discussing facts, then this might not be for you. Paragraph 3, the effects of flood on people, communities, and the economy. Now, this could be descriptive. It could also be factual to a large extent. Paragraph 4, the ways in which a disaster like this could be avoided in the future. Remember, we are still busy with the body of the essay. Now we get to the conclusion. Now, let's just think back to that nice sandwich. Remember, that bottom slice of bread must still be fresh but firm. In the same way, the conclusion brings the essay full circle. It binds the essay into a unit. Here you have to be careful not to introduce a new idea. Remember, conclusion means to end off, to conclude. Sometimes it gets hard to read a moral lesson. Very often we get an essay that says, So, if you do not want to be caught in a mudslide, you have to build your house further away from the riverbank. Or if you don't want to be bullied, you need to stand up for yourself. That's like a little moral lesson. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it isn't a clear recipe for success. And the last one, don't force an end. We sometimes get essays. It hooks the reader into the introductory paragraph. The story develops wonderfully, and the reader is actually enthralled and part of the whole action. And then you don't know how to end it. And then you end it like, and then I woke up. Or, it was all a dream. Everything that you've built up from the beginning of your essay, right up to that point, was brilliant. And then you let it fall flat on its face. How sad is that? So let us practice. I ended off my essay in the following way. The storm died down, as storms eventually do. My heartbeat sounded loud in the silence. I sighed. I knew that this storm might be over, but its impact will live on in my nightmares for years to come. All I have left of my dad were memories and a shoe. This is the end to my essay. I add an ellipsis at the end. I know you don't have to do that, or teachers very often tell you not to use it because we tend to use it too often. But for me, that actually ends it well. Let's go back to the first line. The storm died down as storms eventually do. Could this be a literal end? Could it be figurative? My heartbeat sounded loud in the silence. What does that imply? The storm has passed. I sighed. Yes, that is a sentence. I knew that this storm might be over, but its impact will live on in my nightmares for years to come. Look at the choice of words. Nightmares. We would always talk about in my dreams for the years to come. What is atmosphere is created by the choice of the word nightmares. I don't have to say bad memories or terrible things because it is encapsulated in that specific word. The last sentence leaves the reader thinking about the effects that it has had on the writer. All I have left of my dad were memories and a shoe. I want us to take a 2-minute break, and I want you to write a conclusion to an essay that you think might work. You decide whether it's narrative, argumentative, discursive, reflective, or descriptive. 2 minutes, ladies and gents, and then we will be back on track. So, what was your thought process all about? Could you rewrite or write your own conclusion to your essay? I want to challenge you to keep writing and keep going at it. As we said, the conclusion should make the reader want to read more. It should make the reader think about his reaction to devastation. And here, yes, we sometimes climb into our emotions. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. We get to the editing stage. Now, this is the final phase before we finish up our writing, before we get started on section B and C. Now, editing involves revising, editing, and proofreading. Now, I know that sometimes you can't identify errors in your own writing because it's something that came from you. But you need to be very careful and read it objectively for once. Check your spelling, punctuation, and your grammar. You need to ask yourself, does every paragraph contain one main idea? Or have you kind of bunched everything together? It's also very important to note that you should make sure that you are still on track with the topic. Does it make sense? If you read this, does this really make sense to you? Because that is what the marker or the reader will ask. Is the format correct? When we look at format, remember an essay is constructed with an introduction, 3 to 4 to 6 paragraphs, and a conclusion. How do we indicate the end of a paragraph? A line is left open. You can't start kind of in the middle of a new line and think this is now an indication of a new paragraph. You need to leave the line open. And remember, you can't really carry over an idea into a second paragraph. The second and the third paragraph should have an idea of its own. The next thing is to make sure that it is the correct length. Now, I'm not a math teacher and I'm not a numbers person. So I have never actually thought about the number of words that I write. Some students, though, count every word in a line and write it down like a big sum that they add up at the end of the day. And they actually just write up to the 250 or the 300 words that is required. Don't be that pedantic, but be careful of the length of the essay. Even though sometimes you are not penalized for the length, in other words, the reader stops reading or the marker stops reading and draws a line through the rest and you lose marks because the conclusion is no longer there, you always tend to make more mistakes the more you write. So be sure that you keep to the length as much as possible. Check if there is a clear introduction. Go back to that sandwich. Is it fresh? Is it firm? Does it invite you to take a bite? Check that you have expanded the ideas in the body. Go back to your planning. Make sure that you have actually covered everything that you wanted to cover at the beginning. Check that there is a strong conclusion. Make sure that you have not repeated too much or that you have introduced a new idea. To conclude is to end off. Make sure that that happens. Let's take a look at some common errors writers make. Number 1, misinterpretation of the topic. Why does that happen? When you look at the topics and you identify a key word and you think, that's it, I can write about this, I'm going to write about this, but you did not analyze the topic properly. you might misinterpret it. So you left out very important aspects that need to be covered in this essay. Switching tenses. You start writing your essay in the present tense. And then somewhere along the line, you turn into the past tense. And I want to add to this one the use of misrelated participles. You know that sentence, going to school, I saw my friend walking through the park, we were singing our song, climbing the trees. What is wrong with that? Walking down the street. You can't start a sentence like that. As I was walking down the street. Be careful of that. We often use the ing forms. Then we refer to the length, 3-page essays. Now, if you don't want to count your words literally, you know the size of your writing. A normal handwriting for 250 to 300 words would be a page to a page and a half. The moment you get to your 2-pager and you have a small handwriting, you should know you are exceeding the length, and then you are getting into trouble. You are treading muddy waters. No climax. Remember what we talked about, the structure of a story. The introduction, the setting, strong characters, good plot, conflict, rising action, and then you get to nothing. You just keep waffling on and on and on and on, but there's nothing that you can work towards. That is actually an indication that you've got the wrong topic. It's very sad when you realize that only right 10 minutes before you need to move to section B. So make sure that when you plan and you write your essay, that you have a clear point that you want to work towards. Boring essays. Now, you know when you watch a boring movie, why it's boring. Boring essays are exactly the same. And when you revisit this presentation and you look at things that I mentioned that you might be doing wrong or things that you should be doing right, you might realize that much of your writing is actually quite boring and you don't even want to read it. So challenge yourself and read that. Read it again. Change it if you have to. An example of that, I woke up and it was all a dream. It falls flat on its face. When the introduction to an essay is too long, you've actually told the whole story in the introduction. That is also a common mistake, because there's nothing new that you want to add or that the reader wants to explore in the rest of your essay. And then loose ends. I refer you back to the sandwich. Top layer of the bread, fresh, firm, and the insides, little bits and pieces, and the conclusion, also strong and firm. If either the introduction or the conclusion isn't strong enough, your sandwich is going to fall on the floor. In the same way, your essay is going to fall flat on its face. And we don't want that. We want good marks, and we want to go, that was a great story. So how do you prepare for the essay? I can almost hear you saying, prepare for the essay. No, really, it's just writing. It's the one paper that I don't have to study for. Grade 12, preparing starts in grade 8. Yes, I know you are grade 12 now and it's a little too late for that, but you can still practice a little, write a lot, do activities, test yourself. First of all, you have to prepare for this paper. You can't just waltz in there and write. I know paper 3 is the last paper in your timetable for the final exams. And I know you've had 4 weeks of studying through the night because you're cramming, because you haven't started preparing early enough. And then you come to paper 3 and you think, my holiday has already started. Grade 12 student, paper 3 carries the most weight. It counts 100 of the marks for your total for English. And this is the space where you can get credit for your thoughts, your ideas, your dreams. So why don't take the trouble to actually prepare for it? One way of preparing for the essay is to work through previous exam papers. And I want to refer you back to analyzing the topics. You can take all the previous exam papers. You don't have to write an essay. Look at the topic, analyze the topic, and you might surprise yourself with a topic that you would never have dreamed of choosing before. And then you can quickly brainstorm it. Remember, it's just thoughts and ideas. And you are not going to get that same topic in your final exam, but it's the skill of developing the idea, of interpreting the topic, of developing the ideas in the essay that will stand you in good stead. So that with whatever topic you are confronted with, you will be able to write about it. Analyze the topics. You need to practice brainstorming. Brainstorming just doesn't happen. It's something that you have to practice. And you can use this in any of your subjects where you need to write essays. The moment you see a question, analyze the question, and then you divide it into little bits. Now, with a subject like business studies, for example, you already have your ideas. You have the subheadings. Brainstorm those headings, and you'll be surprised at how much you actually know. Back to our essay. Sleep is something that we all love. But strangely enough, when we get to the exams, we never get enough sleep, especially before paper 3. Paper 3 asks of you to delve deeply into your heart and into your soul and into your prior knowledge and into your knapsack of vocabulary. Imagine how tired your brain would be if you partied the night before, or if you studied for something else, and you don't spend enough time preparing or sleeping, letting your brain prepare for the next day to be creative. Let me give you a couple of top tips. Write as though you have something to say and not only for marks. The ultimate point of the exercise, yes, you need to achieve high marks. You need to get high marks. And paper 3 is the one paper where you can actually get it. If you are developed your skills, if you've got enough vocabulary, if you do your proofreading, editing well enough, if your planning was strong enough, then you will get good marks. But I want to challenge you to actually think about this as something just for yourself. And even if you don't think you're a good writer, everybody can do that. Allow yourself to actually explore your imagination and your thoughts. Don't be scared of them. Use your imagination. you might surprise yourself. And then a very, very sore point for markers. When we mark papers at the end of the year, it's always saddening to think that young people think us so old that we don't read books or we don't watch movies. We do. And language teachers, more than any of the others, tend to love reading. We tend to watch movies avidly. And by the way, we do have Netflix. So I don't want you to copy the content of an existing novel or an existing movie and rehash it and present it to me as the reader as though it's something new. We know about that. Be original. You are young. You've got hopes. You've got dreams. You've got great ideas. Be original. Share that with the reader. And then, of course, an element of surprise goes a long way. What do I mean by that? Very often there's a topic or a picture in paper 3 that actually lends itself to changing the point of view. It might be my long journey. Why don't you write that from the point of view of a fly that got into the baggage? Don't you think that that might be interesting? You have to rethink the way you look at traveling or your destination. If you write an essay like that, it is quite imaginative, and very often the marker would mark it up a little bit. So surprise the reader, surprise the marker, and ultimately surprise yourself. Keep an open mind. When you read through the topics, very often you just pass over some because you think, oh, this is a boring topic. Very often it's that seemingly boring topic that would open up avenues of imagination that you've never thought of. I have a saying. I don't wear a lot of jewelry because I think it's superfluous. There's too much. It's like wearing too much makeup. It's very good when you go on stage. But when you visit your friends for a tea party in a garden restaurant, it's much too much. In the same way, when you write an essay, you need to keep it simple. Do not use vocabulary that seems impressive if you can't use it properly. Very often, learners or writers use words that sound very impressive. And then they found one word and they use it often. Like the word hence. It is a perfectly brilliant word, used in the right circumstances. But when you use it often or too often, then it becomes boring again. So rather than adding all these amazing words to show the writer that, or the reader that you've got such a good vocabulary, rather focus on one or two impressive words or ideas or comparisons, for that matter, to impress them, little bits, because that gives you a taste for more. When you write paper 3 and you get involved in the writing process, it is really easy to lose track of time. And that's another reason why you should look at previous exam papers. Not because of the topics, because remember, you're not going to get the same ones again, but to practice timekeeping. And by the way, that is a skill that you have to use for all of your question papers. Grade 12s of this year, especially you, because you haven't written a full question paper just yet, and that makes it quite tricky. You need to make sure that in the when you open your question paper, there is instructions. Read those instructions. Don't think that you already know what those instructions are. Look at them carefully, and the instructions will give you an indication of the time that you need to spend on that specific question. That question would then, when you look at your previous exam papers, time yourself and see whether you can go through the process in that specific time. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's around 50 minutes for the essay, section A. Timekeeping, extremely important. And then write neatly and clearly. Remember that at the end of the year, you are part of thousands of scripts, nameless scripts. You are a number. You don't know who's going to mark your essay, and you don't know whether your essay will be marked on day 3 or day 4. Those poor markers have been marking for 10 hours non-stop every day. If your writing is like scrawling, they are not going to try and decipher it. So be nice to the marker, be nice to your teacher, and write neatly and clearly. And while I'm at that point, use a color blue that is strong. We all like light pens, but sometimes they become illegible the later we have to mark it. Ultimately, it is your writing. It is your process, and you need to enjoy it. Grade 12s, I hope that you have used 1 or 2 or 3 tips in this presentation, and that you write on a different level, and that you excite yourself. Thank you for watching this lesson. Please remember to sanitize, wear your mask, maintain social distancing, and keep safe. See you next time. Bye.